Ninth and Lex.
Welcome to the preview of episode 65, the symbiosis of drawing and models. Okay, this is the preliminary, the kind of like the basic premise of what we'll be talking about Sunday night. Now, unfortunately for anyone who's listening, this is probably going to be more about an idea that's kind of pertinent to me than to Julie. So it'll probably be insufferably boring, long-winded, and kind of like probably put you to sleep.
Well, that's enticing.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I always apologize. I mean, in fact, I still remember last time we were on television, the major kind of feedback we got from most people's papers. You know what? Next time, just let Julie talk more.
That's funny.
It's true, though.
Yep.
Anyway, so this is a series of ruminations. We do once a week, but I mean, in this case, we usually do a preview because I think what's happened is a lot of people told us that there's a benefit to kind of giving a basic beginning to what is we'll be talking about. So here's a piece from The Century of Genius by Whitehead, Science in the Modern World. We've talked about this book before. It's kind of one of my favorite books. Julie got it for me, and I love it. It comes out of that triumvirate of great works that Whitehead put together, along with Adventures of Ideas and kind of Process and Reality. I mean, one Process really more likely the magnus opus, but the other two books basically do develop off these similar things. And actually, when I was reading Aims of Education a couple weeks ago, I realized that there was a lot of things that I had kind of missed over because I'd read that book previously. It was an earlier book, but kind of turned out to be valuable. So anyway, one of the things that we'll talk about is, the nature of what a model is. Now, I mean, I remember saying back probably in the mid-1980s, people talked about like architects build buildings. And I said, no, contractors build buildings. Architects don't build. Architects make models. Now, models are an incredibly important thing in the fact that they are basically suppositions. They're analogies, they're metaphors. They are kind of like bits of kind of magic that we basically create. And hopefully from that, certain things will come about. What I've done in my process in making work in terms of like organic design thinking is kind of found a way that if I can approach novel utility, I do it as a result of using drawing and models as a symbiotic relationship in order to kind of what I would call provoke compelling perspectives. I think that perspective is that thing that gives new insight. And I think in order to do that, it doesn't just do it individually. It does it in a kind of like larger perspective and even in a generational sense. So with that said, in terms of this, okay. All right. And induction has now understand. Okay, another thing. We may understand the difference between induction and deductive in terms of methods. Induction is basically when we have a series of observations from which we form a kind of generalization. Deduction is when we basically take this generalization and try to support it on things that kind of would actually prove its validity. Most people feel as if there is a kind of like a kind of stoic scientism in deduction. One of the things I believe, and I kind of like, because I love the speculative nature, I think that the imagination, the curiosity, the adventure comes from this vindication in these books and these words by Whitehead, in fact, where he talks about the kind of speculative nature. And in fact, this is a kind of a criticism of Bacon in The Century of Genius. Okay. Bacon devoted himself in his writings. Induction was proved to be a somewhat more complex process than Bacon anticipated. He had in his mind the belief that with a sufficient care in the collection of instances, the general law would stand out of itself. We know now, and probably Harvey knew then, this is a very inadequate account of the process, which issue is scientific generalization. So, let me just finish up and then I'll be done. Is that this chapter, The Century of Genius, was in fact, I feel, an incredibly important explanation of the value of consequence, because Whitehead believes curiosity, imagination, intuition, formulation, speculation is something that is paramount, is essential, is fundamental. And I believe that drawing and model building both have that ability to be able to provoke those compelling perspectives. There's another quote from Whitehead, and I don't want to get too much into it, but I think that that's basically where I feel as if these two, the unbreakable bond between, model building and drawing, has a symbiotic relationship that does generate perspective. Okay, that's it. That's the basic premise for which we'll build on Sunday.
That's fascinating.
I know.
Well, I find that the primary criticism of Bacon, mostly amongst academic circles, less among the lay people, is it's never quite crispy enough.
Yeah.
You had to get
That's
a Bacon
funny.
joke in there.
That's exactly. No, exactly. But I think that in working within the confines of architecture, I came to this understanding that there had to be a more kind of, we talked a couple of weeks ago, what was it? We talked about, I think, we talked about drawing as a generator. Now, this may be a bit confusing, so I've got to go through this slowly. Drawing is also a model. So in fact, both drawing is a model, models are models, but the point is they both have a slightly different character in which they can kind of provoke perspective as a process. So what I've found is in the course of, we talked about the drawing as a generator, we'll talk about the model as a generator, but the process itself is very kind of symbiotic in the fact that the two will be able to kind of like reveal the potential for perspective. And we've talked about the value of perspective in terms of the fact that that is the thing that kind of gives us insight deeper into things, into our understanding. Same.
Yes.
Same.
I believe, and not paradoxically, actually, that drawing is a verbal model. And I will explain.
Oh.
Yes. Drawing as a verbal model, in the way the drawing is generated, in the connection, the hand-brain connection, the articulation of ideas in its most direct and lucid form, is the closest thing to a vocabulary of words that is, in fact, a visual articulation, a visual manifestation of the vocabulary of words. So, and in fact, the structure of drawing is very much like the structure of language. And I would say that something on paper, if you look at it as a one-dimensional cartography or a word map, is very, very close to the way adverbs, adjectives, nouns, and various other parts of the language are formulated and employed and built upon, just like drawing is the foundation for pretty much everything else.
That's interesting. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think what happened is, as I found, is if most of the times my drawings and models were in service to things that had already been kind of like either generated, imposed, or kind of like prophesized by something beyond themselves as a process. I found this kind of more as if like they were kind of like slave to something that was not adequate to what they were capable among themselves. So by generating this, is by kind of distilling it down to just the two themselves as the ability to kind of like start from that idea of what we talked about, the architecturally provocative artifact, is that they had the intent that there was something about it. And we remember that part when Whitehead talks about the fact that, the idea of approving an idea is not just that it can be proved, that it has an importance worth looking for. So that was why I felt that there was a certain affection that was necessary in this case. Anyway, so that's basically the premise. And I'll talk more in depth about that in terms of the fact that there's a kind of more direct way of kind of working through that the model and the drawing are separate entities, separate activities, but in fact they maybe I'll think more about it, what there actually is a difference, and rather than maybe just kind of like two-dimensional or three-dimensional models.
No, I'd like to.
Yeah, say. Okay, go ahead.
If I may. I believe that a model is the full bloom of a previously articulated idea in drawing.
I wouldn't agree.
Oh,
But
let
I
me
want to hear it
finish.
out. Let me hear it. Yeah, that
Yes.
sounds interesting.
Just like older chocolate is still edible, but it gets what's called a bloom. And the bloom are actually the various elements, the interior rising to the surface of the chocolate, causing a grayish, whitish substance. Usually it's fatty acids and things of that sort. But when someone is speaking, whether it be an artist, a scientist, they are drawing out, if they can draw, one of the best ways to explain one's ideas is to draw as one speaks. And one of the best ways to articulate what's in one's own mind, I find, is to draw as I'm narrating in my own interior mind. At that point, when I begin to affix the next phases of articulation, in my case, when I'm planning the palettes for a color, and I make my various signs and labels showing the combinations, the organic roots of the color, I would compare that to a carving or bas relief. And then when I progress to a model, I think it is the bloom, whether it's the bloom of a wine, the bloom of a chocolate, or the bloom of plant science and fully formed ideas. I believe that by the time it's gotten to a model state, that it has acquired many of the morphological traits that were worked out fundamentally in the primary drawing phase. That's my take on it.
I would say that's possible, and the fact that I would say that there's a certain amount of completeness. But I say that the completeness is more of the supposition or the question rather than the kind of like the possibility of the fact that there's a complete creation. I find that one of the things that's very important is to kind of see the potential laden in these things. Now, granted, I think here's a really good point, is that as these things come to fruition, new things will be added other than those things that you were kind of like initially kind of promised or speculated about. I mean, I think one of the things I've always loved, I think I love about organic design thinking, is too many times as a conscious desire to kind of like have that, kind of eureka moment. It's like, look, I found it. I was right.
That's not really how science works.
No, well, I mean, it may be how some science works, but it's not interesting to me. I mean, I like the fact that as a result of kind of the process, you're like, oh, what the hell is this? You know what I mean? So for me, it's like the fact that when you have that sense of discovery of something, you're like, oh, see, I think that idea is that you're generating a perspective. That perspective basically allows you to gain insight. To me, I don't know that we can consciously kind of conjure up everything we're looking for. I feel a lot of times that we stumble into it, but I enjoy the process by which we stumble into it. Anyway, that's it for now. Unless you say last words.
Yeah, say that I in no way think of the model as a complete and thorough incubated idea. I see it as a more fully formed version of what was a drawing or was a blueprint or was perhaps a collaged effort of many different sources all congealing. I still see the model as an intermediary step in a greater narrative realm, just to quantify that.
Okay. Yeah, it is a thing in itself. And what's interesting is a lot of times what happens is, as I think one of the great things about great art is the fact that it grows beyond the capabilities of its author. And we talked last week about Freud. He was talking about that idea, the fact that like you, if you're fortunate, can basically look. And I think what's good about this is there is a separation, is that you can kind of put yourself in a position where, since you're not trying to discover something by using the model to kind of like further an end, you're actually kind of seeing the fact you can step back and look at your model and say like, oh, I didn't realize I just did this. So, okay, the realm of ideas, anything?
Yes. Okay. I see the model as a secret password of sorts, your secret password that other people don't know or don't understand to enter a world that you've already partially planned out.
It's
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's to the benefit of all for us to keep it that way.
Swordfish.
Oh, nice.